Rich people don't sleep 8 hours a day. That's a third of your life. It ain't but 24 hours in a day. You cannot be sleep 8 hours a day. You can't live in LA and wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's 11 o'clock on the East Coast. The stock market been open 2 hours. They already making decisions about your life, and your ass was sleep.
You got to be willing to work off for 3 hours of sleep, 2 hours. If you really want to be successful, some days you're going to have to stay up 3 days in a row. Because if you go to sleep, you might miss the opportunity to be successful. That's how bad you got to want it.
I'm sorry, but here's the fact. All of you have extraordinary capabilities. All of you. You have to decide if you are willing to do the things to put you in that category. It's no other way.
I don't know about you, but I'm tired. Like 3 months ago, I was at the dentist, and while I was lying there, I had this vivid memory pop up in my mind. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I remember going to the dentist and thinking, I'm going to be the best kid this dentist has ever worked on. Like, they are going to be so impressed. I know lots of kids come in and give these dentists a hard time, but I'm going to be the best. And I can't help but think how funny and at the same time heartbreaking it was for me as a 7-year-old kid to have the need to impress my dentist. Months ago, when I stopped denying the fact that I was dealing with depression, I started to dig really deep. I sat down with my fears, with my desires, with my depressions, and I was like, okay, it's time to listen. I'm gonna listen to what's going on underneath it all. And what I found was kind of shocking, but at the same time, it felt incredibly familiar. My biggest fear in life is to be ordinary. What I think being ordinary means, you don't stand out, no one remembers you, you have no impact, you don't make a difference, you're not impressive, you don't reach your maximum potential, you wasted your life, and the odds of you being loved decrease because people like extraordinary people, and who doesn't want to be respected and admired? Depression has a way of taking away all those filters and the rose-colored glasses. This past summer, I was looking for a 12-step group online because I wondered if it might help me with my addiction to self-help and self-improvement and personal growth and all that stuff. It's such a meta moment when you're looking for help for your problem with self-help. It started with a few TED Talks, running a marathon, and The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. It's not an exaggeration for me to say that YouTube has changed my life. I watched TED Talks by people spreading ideas about dreaming big, the psychology of changing your mind to change your life, philosophies on happiness. I learned how to train for a marathon and picked up running as a hobby that kept me sane for 3 years. The internet and books opened up portals, eventually taking me around the world and discovering my creativity and all these beautiful things. I'm a voracious reader. I love books, but I put fiction away for a few years to read a lot of self-help and personal growth type of things. Books, podcasts, talks, all of these resources have helped me learn a lot and expand my world in so many ways, and even deepening my spiritual life. It's been amazing. But what the self-help industry won't tell you is that self-improvement has worked when you don't need it anymore. I think the dark side of these resources is this perpetuation of making people feel like they're not enough, that there's always something to improve, and you're just never satisfied. But I think when something has helped you, and it's usually something that makes you feel like you are enough and that you are loved. But then on the flip side of that, I'm just like, who wants to just be enough, just good enough? I want to be extraordinary, extraordinary. okay, extra. This summer I was in Colorado with a friend and we were hanging out with her friends, and somehow my podcast project came up in the conversation, and they asked me, "Oh, what's the name of your podcast?" And I couldn't tell them. I couldn't say it out loud because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed of my podcast. And the truth of that moment hit me very hard. The truth is, I am deeply ashamed of everything that I make. Everything that I've ever made, whether it's design, music, writing, videos, podcast, nothing is good enough. The truth is, I'm kind of mortified by everything that I make because it isn't great or impressive. It isn't extraordinary. My quest for self-improvement has turned into deep judgment and shame for not being successful, fit, rich, pretty, spiritual, intellectual, beyond average. Here's the reality. Most people will be average and ordinary. And I am most people, even if my ego and vanity do not like this fact. But the question is, when did ordinary become the new failure? And when I say ordinary, it doesn't negate the fact that we're all unique and we have unique qualities and we're different in our own ways, although very much the same in many ways. But extraordinary in this context is about being impressive or having this impressive life or impact by society and cultural standards and values. I don't know about you, but I'm tired. I've carried around this deep fear of not being exceptional, a burden of expectations to be above average, a sickness to be remarkable, and it's a heavy burden. Even in the church culture that I grew up in, I was told that you should surrender to the higher calling of God so I could live a worthwhile life. And we were told that there were two kinds of people in the church, the lay people who were just, their ordinary lives, worried about mundane things. And then there were these people chosen by God to be spiritual leaders and live this other life that was a higher calling and a higher purpose, which sounds very familiar to all the self-help stuff. It's just like there's, the ordinary people, but you are the extraordinary one. So you're going to choose a different life and be special, extra special, be more impressive. Hearing this from church and in the culture and society for people who are achieving type A, people like me, that kind of stuff grows like weeds in us, I think there are those of us who are ambitious, and then there are other people who feel shame for not being as ambitious. Like we can't get away from this. Like we have to achieve in this culture. It creates this fear that you're somehow wasting your life. You're not maximizing your potential. And potential is something we're going to talk about in the future, because I think potential doesn't just mean your ability to make money or to achieve status. And anyway, and so with this narrative that you might be wasting your life brings in this dangerous thought that maybe a life isn't truly worthwhile unless it is notable, impressive, or has the attention of the population. And these are my questions. Like, do we have to do this? Must we strive to be superior to the rest of humanity? I'm not talking about unhealthy habits. I'm talking about our need to be seen as impressive and valuable. What is the value of our lives in society? There's this quote from J.D. Salinger's book, Franny and Zooey, that I find really challenging. Here's what he says. Just because I'm so horribly conditioned to accept everyone else's values, and just because I like applause and people to rave about me doesn't make it right. I'm sick of not having the courage to be an absolute nobody. If I had this courage to be an absolute nobody, then maybe I would freely and authentically choose what I truly value and not be driven by my ego and vanity for this exceptionalism. There is this underlying fear that if I accept mediocrity, then I'll never want to improve, that I'll have no motivation or ambition, or to have the desire to do something great and to keep growing. You know, Tiara, what if I'm one of the rare few that was truly destined for exceptionalism? What if I stop short, of my full potential? But let me tell you, as a child of immigrants, as a workaholic or a recovering workaholic and overachiever, I will never be short on ambition. That's just the truth. The true task for me is to curb it and to live a satisfied life, a life of enough. This will be a daily battle. Nothing in my life has been enough for the past 30 years. It is not going to change overnight. I'm laying to rest this idea that we are failures for not beating statistical odds. I want to take back the right to be average so I can be free to actually do my best and not be ashamed of not being the next greatest hit. And what I mean by average is that there will be things that you give your 110% to, and you will still land in the middle range of whatever and whomever you're comparing yourself to. And we have to let ourselves do that and not be ashamed. And we're not here making mediocrity the goal. We're just accepting that a lot of life will be in that middle space anyway. I'm letting go of my need for maximizing transcendent experiences, that desire for every moment of life to be extraordinary. And I want to make room for the ordinary. And the paradox of all of this is the more I observe, the more I listen to my heart that pumps the life in me, the lungs that do their thing, and how everyone else around me has these things inside of them that keeps us alive, and how it is improbable for us to be here in the first place, well, then everything is kind of miraculous in its own way. And nothing is really quite ordinary when you learn to see. I want to stop stressing and striving and shaming and punishing myself for not being superior to the rest of humanity. Ordinary is not failure. It's just what most of us are and the moments that take up most of our lives. And it has its own beauty. So let's fall in love with it. You're not a failure for being pretty ordinary. You're just human. That is all. I'll talk to you next week.